These things are proof that you can have great action scenes that are guided by the lore, not breaking it. What's up, MetaNerdz? In today's video, we're going to be talking about the All-Terrain Armored Cargo Transport, or the AT-ACT. We will do a complete breakdown of its stats, see how it was used on multiple planets, and end with some behind-the-scenes facts. The AT-ACT was produced by Kuat Drive Yards, the company that produced almost all of the walkers for the Republic and Empire. Though technically not for sale, word on the HoloNet is that these run the Empire about 125k a piece, just over twice the cost of a TIE fighter. At a glance, the AT-ACT looks like it's just a simple variant of the AT-AT, but it actually has some really big design differences. For starters, you got the size. The cargo transport had a height of 31.85 meters or 104 feet, making it about as tall as an AT-AT with an AT-ST standing on top. And at 34.9 meters or 115 feet long, it was 14 meters longer than the standard AT-AT, being more than an entire X-Wing longer, space that was all used for this large cargo bay. This area was able to carry up to 550 cubic meters of cargo, which could hold a total weight of 5,000 metric tons, about equal to the weight of 6,135 dewbacks. If it showed up here on Earth, it would stand taller than a 10-story building, be about half the length of a 747, have the cargo space of 16 20-foot shipping containers, and haul more cargo than you could fit on the backs of 46,000 horses. They had these specifically designed cargo pods that were used for transport, which had this distinctive orange coloring, a modular system that allowed these pods to be picked up by other ships and vehicles. And we can even see that they were designed to be taken off with this conveying system. This additional height did provide for a longer stride, but came at the cost of structural stability. U-Wings at the Battle of Scarif were able to exploit this weakness and bring the whole thing crashing down with a single mounted Robo M45 heavy repeating ion cannon. Whereas on Hoth, we saw that the more powerful P-Tower laser cannons proved ineffective on a standard AT-AT. So how is this possible? Well, it is due to a very important difference in the design of this cargo walker. To provide extra power to move this enormous cargo, the AT-ACT has stronger engines, which is simple enough, but to help with the fact that all of this new weight is set on top of longer legs, the load would be supported by an electromagnetic tensor field. A tensor field essentially nullifies the weight of gravity on objects, making them a whole lot easier to transport. Tensor fields aren't often mentioned in Star Wars lore as much as other types of technology, but you have seen them used before. Some examples of other ships with tensor fields are the C-9979 landing craft, which would generate them in their wings, in order to prevent them from sagging under the extreme weight of all the AATs. And a tensor field failing was the culprit of the invisible hand breaking in half during the Battle of Coruscant, as the ship simply couldn't handle the gravitational pull without one. And with the AT-ACT, we see that the tensor field generators are in the knee, right where the gunner is aiming. With all those ion shots on target, the complete weight of the walker is now bearing down on this single leg. The full, non-nullified load proves too much, and so we don't see it exploding in a ball of flames, but buckling and snapping from supporting too much extra weight. A cool little detail that shows how action can be logically guided by well-written lore, not just dismissed in favor of action scenes, which is so often the case when it comes to things like shields, where we simply have to say that the plot willed it. Its large cargo hold was monitored by stevedore droids, which we unfortunately don't have a current visual of them, but they would help to divide the loads on the walker to make trips more manageable, as some of these experimental materials are described as ultra-dense. And some other interesting things to point out is that the red glow is from an infrared force field generated in the cockpit. The air filters for the vehicle are located right behind the head on the main body, and these walkers use the same solid fuel slugs like we saw in the AT-AT. On board the ACT, you would have a crew of 2 and space for up to 10 passengers, which is 20 less than the AT-AT. Because of its cargo role, overall it had much less armor, but the section just over the cargo container is reinforced. And despite not being intended for assault, it could still defend Imperial assets, coming with 2 Taemin-Bak MS-2 heavy laser cannons, which would be able to blow apart enemy infantry and easily punch a hole in any attacking ground vehicles. The first time we see the AT-ACT in use is during the numerous construction attempts of Fortress Vader on Mustafar. The Sith Lord consulted an ancient Sith ghost known as Momin to help in the construction of a building that would focus dark-side energy. The design of the fortress would start off being rather different from the final version that we would see, with each of its predecessors having a very unlucky history, each being destroyed in some unforeseen way. This would happen 8 times, with the 9th building being the one we see in Rogue One. Due to the harsh nature of Mustafar, Vader would use AT-ACTs and OICTs to build each of the different versions. These would be very useful in safely transporting building materials across the hazardous hellscape. Not only would the lava be dangerous to typical vehicles, but on several occasions, the troops and vehicles stationed at the construction site would be attacked by the local Mustafarians, who weren't too thrilled with a Dark Lord of the Sith plotting his castle right on their home. On one occasion, 3 Force-sensitive Mustafarians would use their power in an attempt to flood the castle with lava, killing off almost all of the Imperial troops and destroying most of the vehicles. Vader would be able to survive the attack by using the wreckage of an AT-ACT that had been swept up by the lava, and so Vader has this vehicle to thank for him not losing any more limbs to the fires of Mustafar. The next time we would see this walker would be on the tropical paradise world of Scarif. Here, the AT-ACTs were used to transport heavy cargo and materials across the shallow waters surrounding the Citadel, a highly secretive research base as well as an archive for the Galactic Empire. In the year 0 BBY, the Rebel Alliance would mount an attack on the Citadel in a gambit to gain access to the Death Star plans. The Rebels would infiltrate the compound using a stolen Zeta class, and a ground battle would ensue. The Rebels would then come under intense fire from at least 4 AT-ACTs. This would turn the tide in the Empire's favor, but the victory was cut short when several Rebel starfighters would get past the shield ring. These starfighters easily destroyed all the walkers, paving a clear way for the Rebels to the Citadel. This battle showcased that when against something light like infantry, it was able to defend itself from small arms fire, and even take a rocket directly to the head, just shrugging it off. But due to its overall lack of armor, it is at a heavy disadvantage to purpose-made starfighters. The X-Wings, having more firepower than most starfighters, and packed a way bigger punch than the T-47 airspeeders on Hoth. These could also be seen on the shipyards of Kuat Drive Yards, transporting materials for building the weapons and ships used by the Empire. Like its use on Scarif, these wouldn't see any action until the facility came under attack. 5 years after the Battle of Yavin, the New Republic launched a bombing campaign against the shipyard ring, in an effort to cut off the Imperial remnants supplied to arms and armor. KDY would be forced to use any available assets they had to fend off the New Republic starships. AT-ATs, AT-STs, AT-ACTs, and even the remaining AT-TEs would be used in the defense of these shipyards. But they would not be able to keep the New Republic at bay, and Imperial forces eventually surrendered. And some of these also saw service on the Wookiee home planet of Kashyyyk, where they were used to transport building materials for new Imperial bases, and even transport some Wookiee slaves. After the fall of the Empire and 5 ABY at the Battle of Jakku, Imperial forces on the various worlds across the Empire would surrender and leave. One AT-ACT would be left behind on the Wookiee homeworld, where it would slowly deteriorate and be covered by the natural environment. By 7 ABY, this AT-ACT would be almost completely covered in vegetation, and Han Solo would come across this walker during one of his trips to Kashyyyk. So that's it for its history and breakdown, but you definitely want to hear these cool facts and behind-the-scenes stuff. It first appeared in Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and the tale of it being used on Mustafar comes from the Darth Vader comic series, issues 23 and 24. The stories of them on Kuat came from Star Wars Insider, and Han Solo finds one on Kashyyyk in the novel Last Shot. And it should be noted that the AT-ACT has some potential inconsistencies across various sources. For starters, it's said that it has longer legs to give it a faster stride over the normal AT-AT, but its top speed is 50 km per hour, or 31 miles per hour. Whereas the AT-AT tops out at 60 km per hour, or 37 miles per hour. Perhaps its speed is much quicker than it would have been if it had all that cargo on those smaller legs, but it's still incredibly slow. As many fans have pointed out, something like the Juggernaut seems like it would have fit all of the Empire's goals while still being a lot quicker. And since its wheels are actually spinning metal discs, not rubber, it would have done fine on Mustafar too. Probably better in the marshes of Kashyyyk and the sands of Scarif. Another possible inconsistency is that with the pilots of the AT-ACT. The Visual Dictionary for Rogue One states that any qualified driver of the Empire could pilot the AT-ACT, and that they had no specified pilot corps. But they get this completely different look and helmet, and so if not a separate corps, they definitely went by the title of AT-ACT pilot. And just before we end, a little shout out to the OICT mentioned earlier. Currently, there is almost no information regarding it, aside from its appearance in the Darth Vader comic and a small on-screen appearance in Solo. There's just no stats or history on it. Funny enough, not even what the acronym stands for. The C in CT probably stands for crane or just cargo. So that's it for the AT-ACT. If you want to connect with us on social media, find ways that you can help support this channel without it costing you a thing, or check out our Patreon. Be sure to check out the links in the description. Special shout out to our supporters over on Patreon. But most important of all, remember, these walkers used to strike fear into the rebels, until they took an ion cannon to the knee. And the Force will be with you. Always.